The Galactic Council chamber was silent. The air was thick with tension as representatives of dozens of species watched the central platform. At the podium stood Supreme Chancellor Vornak of the Silari Dominion, his red scales glistening under the chamber's artificial lights. His voice echoed through the grand hall. "The time has come," Vornak declared, his slitted eyes narrowing. "Humanity refuses to obey. They refuse to acknowledge our authority. This is a direct insult to the Galactic Council." Murmurs spread across the chamber. Some nodded in agreement, others looked uncertain. A hologram flickered in the air, displaying the latest reports. It showed the human expansion across the stars. Despite being one of the youngest races in the galaxy, their influence was growing at an alarming rate. "We have given them chances," continued Vornak. "We offered them a place under our rule. We warned them. And yet, they defy us." A deep voice interrupted. "Defy, or simply refuse to bow." All heads turned to Ambassador Grayson, the sole human representative. He stood tall, his sharp blue eyes unwavering. "Humanity never asked for your rule. We only asked for peace. But you don't want peace, do you?" Vornak sneered. "Peace? No, we want order. And for that, we must remove the problem, your kind." Silence. Then Vornak raised his clawed hand. "From this moment, humanity is an enemy of the Galactic Council. All members shall prepare for war." The declaration had been made. The enemy moves. Within hours, the galactic news spread like wildfire. "War, DCLARDO and humanity." The headline flashed across thousands of star systems. Alien fleets mobilized, preparing to strike. The galaxy believed this would be an easy victory. Humanity had no empire, no massive fleets, no powerful allies. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and strategically weak. Aboard the Draxian warship Blitfang, Grand Admiral Velker grinned. "Humans won't last a week," he muttered, watching the holographic war map. "We will burn their worlds to ash." His fleet, along with dozens of others, had been ordered to attack. Their first target, Alpha Centauri, humanity's nearest colony. But something strange was happening. Their scouts, sent ahead to survey the human defenses, never returned. Messages from their advance fleets suddenly stopped, and just as Velker was about to demand an explanation, a single transmission interrupted his systems. The screen flickered. A human face appeared. It was General Marcus Hale, Supreme Commander of the United Earth Defense Forces. His expression was calm, almost amused. "So, you declared war on us," he said, his voice carrying a quiet confidence. "Big mistake." Then the transmission cut out. And in that moment, every alien fleet that had moved toward human territory vanished. The control room of the Bloodfang was in chaos. Warning sirens blared as officers scrambled to understand what had just happened. Grand Admiral Velker stood frozen, staring at the darkened screen. What did the humans do? "Communications are down," an officer shouted. "We've lost contact with every ship that entered human space." Velker clenched his fists. "That's impossible. No species can disrupt galactic communications like this." "Sir," another officer cried. "Long-range scanners just picked up something." Velker snapped his head toward the officer. "What do you mean, something?" The officer hesitated. His scales paled with fear. "It's a ship, sir. A human ship." The war room fell silent. A single human ship. Velker scoffed. "They send one ship against an entire fleet. This must be a joke." But then the ship appeared on screen. And the laughter stopped. The Phantom warship. It was unlike anything the aliens had ever seen. It was sleek, black, and silent. No heat signatures, no engine trails, no identifiable energy readings. It should not exist. Yet, it was here. "Scan it," Velker ordered. We can't, sir." Velker turned sharply. "What?" "Our systems can't lock onto it. It's like it's slipping through space itself. Velker's claws tapped against the control panel. This was wrong. Every species in the galaxy had studied human technology. Their ships were primitive, relying on outdated FTL drives and weak energy weapons. But this ship, this phantom warship, felt like something else entirely. Then it moved. One moment it was 100 kilometers away. The next, it was inside their formation. Velker barely had time to react before the ship's weapons came to life. A nightmare unleashed. Without warning, red beams of energy sliced through space, hitting 3 Draxian warships. The Bloodfang's crew watched in horror as the ships didn't explode. They simply disappeared. No wreckage, no debris, no escape pods, just empty space. Velker's eyes widened. What kind of weapon is that? The officer's voice trembled. Unknown, sir. It bypassed shields completely. Velker's blood ran cold. No known weapon in the galaxy could do that. Then, the Phantom warship sent out a transmission. General Marcus Hale appeared on screen again, his face calm but his eyes filled with something terrifying. I warned you, he said. You declared war on humans. Now, you learn why that was a mistake. The transmission cut, and the nightmare truly began. Panic spread like wildfire across the Draxian fleet. Ships scrambled to reposition, but nothing made sense. Their enemy, a single human warship, was defying every known rule of space combat. Admiral Velker slammed his fist onto the control panel. Where is that ship? Sir, an officer shouted, his voice shaking. We've lost visual. It just disappeared. Velker's eyes narrowed. What do you mean disappeared? Ships don't just vanish. But deep inside, he knew this was no ordinary enemy. The humans were hiding something. The silent predator. The Draxian fleet, once confident, now floated in uneasy silence. Their scanners were useless. Their formations were breaking. Then, without warning, boom! A massive explosion rocked the fleet. A battleship on the outer perimeter was gone. No distress signal. No energy surge. Just erased from existence. Velker's claws dug into the armrest of his command chair. Where is the attack coming from? More explosions erupted across the fleet. 1 ship, then 2, then 5. The officers in the war room could only watch in horror as their mighty armada was picked apart, one by one. The voice of doom. A transmission cut through the chaos. The human general, Marcus Hale, appeared on the main screen, his expression cold. You wanted war. Hale's voice was calm, almost mocking. This isn't war. This is a lesson. Velker's rage boiled over. What do you want? He snarled. Hale leaned forward. I want you to understand. The screen flickered, and suddenly, Velker saw something that made his blood freeze. It was a live feed, from inside one of his own warships. Velker's officers gasped. How was this possible? The feed showed Draxian soldiers, their weapons raised, but they weren't shooting. They were screaming. Something was hunting them. Shadows flickered. Bodies collapsed. Then the camera turned, and a human soldier stood there, smiling. A whisper echoed through the war room speakers. You never stood a chance. The screen went black. Silence. Then Velker heard the worst sound of his life. The automated distress beacon. The fleet's own emergency system had activated. And that meant only one thing. The fleet was lost. The bridge of the Draxian command ship was in chaos. Officers barked conflicting orders, screens flashed red with critical alerts, and the emergency beacon, normally reserved for total annihilation scenarios, blared through the speakers. Admiral Velker's claws trembled against the armrest of his command chair. He had led hundreds of battles, conquered entire planets, but never had he faced something like this. This is madness, one of his officers whispered. Sir, we must surrender before we're all. Velcor turned sharply, his yellow eyes burning with rage. No. We are the Draxian Empire. We do not surrender to primates. The officer swallowed hard and looked away. But deep inside, everyone knew the truth. This was not a war. This was an execution. The silent battlefield. Outside, the once mighty Draxian fleet was now a graveyard. Wreckage floated lifelessly in the void. Fires raged inside broken hulls, oxygen escaping in eerie plumes of mist. The few ships that remained were silent, their captains too afraid to even breathe. And the worst part, no one had seen the human warship. No energy spikes, no weapons fire, no movement. Just ships disappearing, as if they were being erased from reality. A choice that wasn't one. Velcor took a deep breath. His pride fought against his survival instincts. He had never surrendered in his life. But now, with shaking hands, he opened a direct channel to the human warship. "Human commander," he growled. "This is Admiral Velcor of the Draxian fleet. He hesitated, then forced the words out. "I request a ceasefire. We will withdraw." Silence. Then, a familiar voice crackled through the speakers. General Marcus Hale. "Withdraw?" The human's voice was cold. Amused. "You don't get to decide that." Velcor's stomach twisted. "I am offering peace," he hissed. Hale chuckled. "Peace." The feed switched to a live view of Draxian homeworld transmissions. Velcor's blood ran cold. The human fleet had already arrived at Draxia Prime. Not just one ship. Hundreds. Orbit secured. Defense grid disabled. Communications hijacked. And yet, not a single shot had been fired. The message was clear. Humanity didn't need to destroy them. They had already won. The true nightmare. "Your people will not suffer," Hale said calmly. "Not unless you force them to." Velcor slumped in his chair, his pride shattered. There was no fight left to give. His officers stared at him, waiting for orders. But what orders could he give? War was already over. A new reality set in. A terrifying, undeniable truth. The Draxians had not declared war on humanity. They had declared war on something beyond their understanding. And now, they belonged to it. Admiral Velcor sat frozen in his chair. The weight of reality crushed him. The Draxian fleet, his fleet, was gone. His homeworld was under human control, and yet the humans had not fired a single shot. It was not mercy. It was power. And that terrified him more than anything. The voice of victory. "Admiral." The voice of General Marcus Hale came through the transmission again, calm and steady. Too steady. Velcor swallowed his pride. "What are your demands?" A chuckle. Not mocking. Not cruel. Just amused. "We don't need to demand anything," Hale replied. "We could take what we want." Velcor's claws dug into the armrest. He had expected the usual terms: surrender, occupation, resources, a puppet government. This was worse. The humans did not want to rule them. They already did. The impossible offer. "We are not conquerors," Hale continued. "We don't need to wipe out the Draxians. In fact, we'd rather you keep existing." Velcor's eyes narrowed. A trick. It had to be. "And in return?" he asked cautiously. "In return," Hale said, "you will do exactly what you were doing before." Velcor blinked. "You want us to continue as we were?" "Yes," Hale confirmed. "Sane empire, sane rulers, sane fleet, what's left of it, anyway." Velcor clenched his fists. "And if we refuse?" Another chuckle. "Admiral, let's be clear. You don't have a choice." Silence. Cold. Suffocating. Velcor felt his heart pounding. He had expected war, occupation, or extermination. Not this. The humans had rewritten the war. They didn't conquer Draxia. They absorbed it. A future decided. Velcor leaned forward, his voice low. And if we betray you? Hale's voice remained calm. Try it. The transmission cut out. Velcor stared at the blank screen. A pit formed in his stomach. This wasn't surrender. This wasn't war. This was ownership, and the humans had just taken everything, without lifting a finger. Admiral Velcor sat in his private chamber, staring at the war reports that no longer mattered. He should have felt relieved. His world still stood. His people were alive. But instead, he felt something else. A quiet, suffocating horror. The humans had not conquered the Draxians. They had consumed them. And the worst part, his people didn't even realize it. The illusion of freedom. Across Draxia, life continued as if nothing had changed. The government remained in place, the fleet was being rebuilt, and the trade routes were still open. But the Draxians no longer made their own decisions. The humans didn't need to enforce their rule. They had simply made it inevitable. The economy, now dependent on human technology. The fleet, rebuilt with human materials. The future, shaped by human hands. And the Draxians could do nothing to stop it, because they didn't even see it happening. The warning. Velcor's door slid open. His second-in-command, Captain Ravos, stepped inside, her expression tense. "We just received a private transmission," she said, voice barely above a whisper. "From the humans." Velcor exhaled slowly. What do they want now? Ravos hesitated. It wasn't a demand. Velcor frowned. Then what? Ravos tapped a device on the table. A recorded message played. General Marcus Hale's voice filled the room. "Admiral Velcor, we know what you're thinking. You believe this is a cage, a slow conquest wrapped in false freedom." Velcor clenched his jaw. He was right. "You are correct." Silence. Ravos looked at him, eyes wide. Even she hadn't expected that. "You have two choices," Hale continued. "You can fight back. You can try to resist, claw your way back to power. You will fail." Velcor's hands tightened into fists. "Or you can embrace it. You can lead your people into a future where the Draxians survive and thrive. Under us." A pause. Then Hale's final words. "Either way, you will serve humanity. The only question is how much pain it will take before you accept it." The message ended. The unseen chains. Velcor sat back in his chair, heart pounding. Hale was right. The war was over, but the real battle had just begun. And deep inside, Velcor already knew who would win. Admiral Velcor had fought in countless wars. He had seen empires rise and fall. He had commanded fleets that burned entire planets to ash. But now, as he sat alone in his chamber, he faced something far more terrifying than war. Defeat without battle. The last attempt. Captain Ravos stood before him, her expression unreadable. "We must act now," she said, "before it's too late." Velcor gave a hollow laugh. "Too late? Ravos, we lost the moment they didn't kill us." Ravos slammed her fist against the table. "Then we fight from the shadows. We resist. There has to be a way." Velcor looked at her with tired eyes. "Do you think the humans don't expect that? They didn't just win a war, Ravos. They won the future." She shook her head. "I refuse to believe that." Velcor sighed. "Tell me, Captain, what happens if we resist? If we sabotage their supply lines, attack their people?" She hesitated. Velcor leaned forward. "Then they change the deal. They strip our government away. They stop giving us technology. They cut off trade, let our economy starve. And in the end, we come crawling back, begging for their rule." Ravos swallowed hard. "Then, what do we do?" Velcor closed his eyes. He had spent his entire life fighting for Draxia's survival. Now, the only way to protect his people was to surrender. But not with chains, with choice. The speech that changed everything. The Grand Hall of Draxia was filled with leaders, commanders, and diplomats. The tension was suffocating. Velcor stood before them, his voice steady. The humans have defeated us. That is a fact we cannot change. Murmurs filled the room, some with anger, some with fear. But they did not take our world. They did not burn our cities or enslave our people. Silence. They did something worse, Velcro said. They made themselves necessary. More silence. Now, fear settled in, because they all knew it was true. We have two choices, Velcro continued. We can fight a war we cannot win, only to doom ourselves. Or we can take control of our fate. The room held its breath. We will not be their slaves, Velcro said. We will be their partners. Shock, outrage, but also understanding. This is not surrender, Velcro said firmly. This is survival. He looked across the hall, seeing the realization dawn on every face. The humans had won. But if the Draxians were smart, they could win too. The future belongs to humanity and its allies. The war had ended, but the galaxy had changed forever, and deep in the void of space, the humans watched. They had not just conquered an enemy. They had built an empire without firing another shot.